Okay, well, welcome. It is great to have people here as we discuss health and wealth and some of the myths and some of the realities as we age. And this was something that originally I was invited to come and speak at Morgan Hill and the Community Rec Center and speak to the senior facility as well as some members of the community. They were having a health wellness week, and but they wanted to hear from somebody on the financial side as well. And so you all know me as my as my life as a financial advisor and financial planner. And but if you were to ask me what I do besides just financial advising and looking at the markets and looking at planning, is that like a large part of my job is watching people age. And so there are a lot of things that I've learned over the years about aging and, how it impacts finances. And I feel like even though those are two very different subjects, there's a lot of things that are that are very similar when we talk about our health and our wealth. So really, this is just a compilation of things that I've caught along the way, and always open to, if there's something you think I've left out or would like to add, please let me know, because again, this is a compilation, and all of us really have gone through life seeing family members age and that whole process. And so there's a lot we could all think about and help each other out with along the way. So, you all know me and all the things that I do in life, but I actually think that this is like my formula for the future. And as most of you have heard, that Victor and I are becoming empty nesters in the fall. I think it already happened because we just said goodbye to our son as he went off to Europe for a couple of weeks excursion, and now Victor and I are home by ourselves every night. So we're like, what do we do with ourselves, right? And so I think there's a hard transition that happens with people when you go from working every day and having a schedule during the work week to all of a sudden, what is your schedule when you're no longer going into a traditional job? And the only thing that I can compare it to is my weekends. And sometimes I have very high aspirations of what I'm going to have done in the weekend. And then I flounder through it, feeling like I never really did anything because I didn't really like to put together a schedule on my weekends because schedules are for during the week. And I like to have a little bit looser go on the weekends. And there's so much to that. My lists and whatnot. I love tasks and having lists at work. At home, I don't like as much of structure because I'm too structured at work. But when you have a lifelong job or multiple jobs and you have a lot of structure in your job, it is very hard to go from all of that structure to a very loose structure when you retire. And so I think the more you can put together a list of, what makes you happy, what makes you feel like you have purpose in your retirement, the better off you're going to do during that retirement. So this is, what I am liking right now. This may be a future of mine through even when I go to retire. Not doing that anytime soon. Don't worry about that. But these are the things that I think about. Is, what am I doing for my leisure? What am I doing for my volunteer and finding purpose and feeling good? And then staying curious. How do I stay curious and learn along the way? So I tell you, this year, I think Netflix has done so many wonderful documentaries that I've found very interesting. But one of the ones that really impacted me was the Blue Zones on Netflix, which is all about the different zones they call blue zones in the world where they see a lot of centenarians thriving. And so the whole idea is, how do we live better longer? And so I am just going to play a clip. I don't know how many of you have seen this movie or not, but I think it's really phenomenal. And even if you've seen the Blue Zones, I could watch this trailer over and over again and still just find it gives me a smile when I watch it. So just take a look at this and listen, and then we'll have more to talk about after.
What's the best tea to drink on a daily basis?
Okashaki.
Wine. I like the way you roll.
I have found that most of what people think lead to a long, healthy life is misguided or just plain wrong. What if we could reverse engineer longevity? I spent the last 20 years trying to do just that. Is it okay if I? Instead of looking for answers in test tubes, I found 5 places around the world called blue zones where people are living to 100 at the highest rates in the world. What is the secret to living a long time?
Community. If you're depressed, you're not going to live very long.
So the steepness for us is very important. Just by walking, you have an additional energy expenditure.
Do we want to be dormant or do we want to serve humanity?
These people live to 100 at the highest rates in the world. And these secrets can help every one of us to get every good year we can get out of this body of ours. That is the promise of Blue Zones.
So what do you think? It's a really fun thing to look at. And I think, what we hear from the trailer right there is community, sense of purpose. I always think of, my mind is excited by dopamine, bits of dopamine, right? And whatever we can do to find that will keep us happy and excited and mentally and physically fit. And so, we saw sports there, the big pickleball. That was the one in Alta Loma. There was a big pickleball community. That was one of the blue zones that they found. It's funny because I have been playing a lot of tennis, and I think not only do I love it as a sport, but it has created this community that I didn't even know existed in Morgan Hill. And there's always a friend available to play tennis throughout the whole year, in the morning or at night or what have you. And wow, that's really helped me out find more avenues instead of just relying on my kids for entertainment or taking them to sports teams and games and whatnot. So really is important to think about all of that when you're moving into retirement. So what are some of the big myths about retirement and in your health and in your wealth, and where are these things related? So I asked artificial intelligence, Microsoft Pilot, to come up with a picture of a family in a room where everyone is focused on their own thing and very busy, multiple activities going on. But I was very specific that I wanted a gorilla in the room. So this is an AI created picture, which is really an interesting project, just seeing how it works. But I really wanted this gorilla in the room because I think we all assume that things are going to be a certain way. And when it doesn't pan out that way, there tends to be a gorilla in the room, and we need to make sure that we're all in the same place. So, when it comes to either what our expectations are of individual family members in our immediate realm, or our immediate influence or what have you, make sure that everybody is on the same page. Otherwise, you may have a gorilla in your room as well. But here are some big myths and maybe some gorillas that are in the room sometimes. And so the first one I would say is you can only control what's in your control. And, a lot of people have expectations that the government will provide. One way I hear a lot is with people that are caring for aging parents, and they're always seem to be surprised when they find out that Medicare will not cover any long-term um, medical health facilities or whatnot for assisted living. Don't count on it. Plan ahead so that you have a plan for if you need that yourself. Very important to think about that. And another area that I see often is this whole idea that your income will decrease when you are retired. Now, more and more, I am skeptical of that as we see what's going on with our national budget and the need for income from the federal government from taxes. And so one of the things we always think is that our taxes will decrease in retirement, but oftentimes that doesn't happen. And what that can do is that can impact how much you can spend if you have to spend some money on taxes, but also it can impact what your Medicare supplements are going to be. Because if you fall into higher income levels, you end up having to pay more in Medicare supplemental insurance. So think about that. An active lifestyle, like I show my recipe of what an active lifestyle is, and I am banking on that giving me longevity. But life is totally uncertain, and there's no guarantees out there, and I'm definitely aware of that as well. But an active lifestyle will give you the quality of life that you need. And so as you start looking at, retirement and thinking, okay, how many years do I have to live in my retirement? We should be thinking more about the quality of the time while we are here and striving for that. And that active lifestyle, whether it is when you're walking or doing any type of physical exercise, and the community, participation, family participation, volunteering, having something to do along the way will give you that quality of life. That's definitely hard to find if you don't know what to expect. And this one is always, I say this and I laugh because my dad is on the line and watching this. Family will always be there. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. And so whatever your expectations are for your family, let it be known. There's another thing that I think about, and that is, I hear this often from clients. Rule number one is I don't want to be a burden on my children. And a lot of times I think people think that from the financial perspective, they would never want their children to have to pay for their long-term care needs and healthcare needs or what have you at the end of our lives. But it also does mean, where are we getting our active lifestyle from? And family tends to either have time or they don't have time. But we need to rely on other ways of getting of feeling a part of something and entertaining ourselves other than family, just because we all have different situations. Being a sandwich generation ourselves, Victor and me, right now we're running into a situation where we may have more time on our hands because our kids are no longer at home. But then there will be those days where maybe our kids are having kids, and then we have more time and attention that we want to give to our kids. So it's always an ever-changing situation of when your family will be available to you or not. And so always have plans, multiple plans, and remember that if you are relying or counting on family to be there, make sure that they are aware of that as well. The last point I will talk about is diversification is always your friend. So diversification sometimes on the social aspect could be the activities that you're involved in. sometimes when you retire in the get-go, you want to belong to a lot of different things that you were never able to have time for while you were working. But I say go deep. And once maybe there's a lot of different activities that you do at first just to figure out what you really are going to enjoy doing when you no longer have to go into a job. But go deep. That's where you'll have the better relationships. So take more time with only a couple volunteer organizations as opposed to having maybe 5 different things that you're doing. And you will find that you'll have more rewarding experiences and deeper relationships within those organizations. And that will make you feel like you're a part of something bigger. And I always say diversification, comes in. We just talked about the social aspects of diversification and different volunteer and activities that you're doing. But all of you know that it's important to diversify in your finances. There are some times where diversification isn't the best case. And I will tell you that a lot of times I will hear from people that are really like reluctant to consolidate multiple accounts. You may have a couple 401k accounts and then you have the IRAs with me or what have you. But when you start to retire and as you start aging, you really need to simplify your finances. And so diversification to me, the good diversification is owning multiple different investments and not having all of your eggs in one basket, such as, one highly concentrated stock position you may have from the company that you worked for or something like that. But having multiple custodians, meaning you have some money at Vanguard and Fidelity or any, E-Trade, whatever it is, I oftentimes will look at people that hold multiple custodians and see the same stocks in those accounts. So that is not diversification. Don't think that it is. And so better to start simplifying your accounts before you have any sort of cognitive issues, because things get very complicated over time as you age. And so simplification, consolidation is really the true friend. And then diversification within the portfolio is okay. But I tell you, it's like everybody thinks I want to be diversified with my custodian. And I say that's like going to buy milk, the same carton of milk, but you're going to Whole Foods and you're going to Safeway and you're going to Trader Joe's. Why make all those stops? It's a headache. So let me just make sure I didn't back. Yeah. Okay. So now we look at the data. Here is some information that hopefully will be helpful to some. And here are the reasons why I say don't count on government. The first one is Medicare does not cover long-term care. And we need to be very clear. Oops, shoot. I'm going to go back here. Here is what Medicare really does cover. This is from a website, the Senior List, and you can see here that what you will have paid for with Medicare is only really days 1 to 20. So any type of assistance you get, if you have a family member that falls and all of a sudden can't take care of themselves, yes, it may cover you for the first 1 to 20 days, but after that, you're going to have to participate and pony up for a lot of the care costs. And it's interesting when we talk about falls, it seems like it is a lot of times a fall that triggers a lot of other health issues as we age. And so it's very common for somebody to, maybe have some skilled nursing care in the first few days. You break a leg, you can't do anything on your own. Maybe you need that skilled nursing facility. But then if more things start to happen and you lose something cognitively, or there's other healthcare issues, and you're staying longer in a skilled nursing facility, days 21 through 100, you start having to pay. And then after 100 days, all those costs are on you. So it's important to realize that, that is not the answer for taking care of your situation. Back to more information on, thinking about how you pay for assisted care and living facilities in the future. A lot of people also tell me, how can you recommend an attorney that will create the right kind of trust to protect my assets and be able to use Medicaid for that long-term care use? And I, have a different answer than the trusted attorneys that I know and can refer people to. But I will say that, Medicaid is a welfare program. And so I prefer that people don't abuse it. I prefer people to plan ahead, because even if you can get an attorney to protect your assets so that you can use Medicaid and have care paid for, it's not going to be the best care out there. And so if you want to go to one of these assisted living facilities where there's multiple activities going on and they will take care of you, when you're more independent, all the way into a full care, should you need memory care or anything like that, you're going to want a program that is much nicer. And so again, we can only prepare for or control where we're going to be if we have planned for it ahead of time. And so think about that. We're always there to walk you through how much would you need and where would that money come from. And so it's really important to be thinking about those things and starting to, think about a plan for the future. Your spending in retirement will change over time. And I see this time and time again. Think of a happy face, your smile. Your spending is like a smile curve. And so in your earlier years of retirement, you will want to do everything that you never had time to do when you were working. And so those are going to be your higher expenditure years. And then as you age and you may slow down a little bit, and you realize you just don't need all the things that you may have needed in the past, your spending does decline. Until comes a time where maybe your medications are very expensive and you're needing a lot more medical care. And then at the latter years is when your expenses go up again. So think of your spending as a smiley face. Higher in the early years, lower, and then higher again in the later years. And one thing we are seeing is, those longer lifespans. And so preparing ahead of time for not 20 years, but 30 to 40 is better, even if you don't think you're going to make it to that 40-year line. We want to make sure that you never run out of money. And so planning with longer lifespans to us is very important. Another thing to consider is that emotions vary when you no longer receive a paycheck. I think of a paycheck and having that salary coming to you as like a water faucet that's always on. It's always bringing you that income that you need. And once you are turning off that water faucet and relying on whatever water's in the faucet at that point in time, it starts to look like there's not as much there. And so it's really important to think about that and plan ahead for that. And know that it's very common for there to be a lot of tension and stress when you're moving from receiving that paycheck every every 2 weeks or what have you when you were working to, oh, now you have all this money that's supposed to last you a lifetime. That's why I always like to say that think of us as your, your payroll department when you retire, is because that's our job, is to worry and to make sure that you will have enough money to to continue to live life the way you want to live it and never run out of money. And the last thing I think we are all aware of is that that inflation is back. And what we're worried about is, we have not seen inflation like this over the past 10, 15, 20, 30 years. I feel like we didn't really have much inflation. And now all of a sudden, the past 5 years, we're very aware that prices are higher now. And so we have to plan accordingly for that. So here are some retirement by the numbers that look at how much you can expect to pay for certain things during retirement. And this is a 20-year span. And I would say, be prepared to have these assets there for 30, if not 40 years, because we don't know how long we're going to live, and better to be over prepared than under prepared. And so you can see all of the different areas. I know I hear a lot of times, I've got healthcare covered. My Medicare insurance is cheap, and so everything is taken care of. But you can see there in healthcare coverage, there's still $422,000 that is being spent on average with somebody that is paying for Medicare and supplemental insurance. And so it is still a big factor in people's expenses when they retire. Other things to look at is taxes, and food is a large expense. So there's going to be all these expenses. In small print, you can see that $1.7 million is really $85,000 a year. And so when I look at that and I think of 85,000 a year, not sure why my screen just did that. In my book, I look at $85,000 a year and say, okay, how much money do I need? I'm sorry, I'm trying to bring this back to where we are. How much money do I need to make sure that I'm never fully drawing into my principal to cover me for not 20 years, but in a certain amount of years, be it 20, 30, 40 years or what have you. So roughly I would say, okay, it may seem like in 20 years you're going to spend 1.7 million, but I look at that and say, maybe close to 2 million will keep somebody with a budget of $85,000 a year happy throughout their life, and still probably have a little bit, will have some left over in the end of that time period. So it's a different way of looking at it when you're the payroll department than when you are just thinking, here's all my savings for the rest of my life. Will that make it or not? So managing your reality, knowing all of these things are going to happen over time. And it's funny because I have watched multiple people and multiple clients and family and friends retire and go through their later years. And so a lot of what I say today is about experience, but I'll tell you one thing that was really interesting is I was asked to test out some financial and health software, and they asked me a bunch of questions about myself. And and in the end, the software came out and told me what I could expect my life expectancy to be, when I was going to slow down in retirement, and when I would need to go into an assisted living facility. And when I saw those numbers on my own life, all of a sudden life got even more precious to me. So I understand it's scary. It's wild to think, how many more summers do you have in life or whatnot? It's a funny question, but But if we know that there's certainty and it's not infinite, maybe we can enjoy and make our time here more valuable. So managing your reality, here are some of the things that I say are very advisable before, before things start to get chaotic in your life, is to consolidate your assets before your cognitive skills decline. And how do we ever know when our cognitive skills are declining? Because we're living this reality. And so I love this phrase here: you can't see the picture when you're in the frame. Is it's very hard for us all to recognize our own situations. And this is when it's really helpful to have outside advisors outside of your family. Ask a friend, ask me, ask your CPA, your accountant, your estate planning attorney. Ask people outside of your inner circle, because it's easier for them to give you an objective, non-biased opinion on things. But definitely want to consolidate your assets before your cognitive skills decline. I also encourage people of having written plans, not just with their finances, but with their health. What do they want to have happen while they're active and while they're physically fit and able to live on their own, and when they maybe can't live on their own anymore? What is your plan A, your plan B? You can't have too many plans. You can have a C and a D as well, for multiple different situations that might happen. And share this plan with other people, especially your family, so everybody knows what their role is in the plan. Your experienced advisors have seen a lot. And so I say this, and this is one of the reasons why it's important to get multiple opinions, is because we have seen a lot, and we have seen successful situations. We've seen some things that went awry and some complications, and we will always bring that to the table with us when you have that experience behind us. Discuss your plans with family members. Again, you want to make sure everybody's on the same page and knows what their role is within the family. So Prudential used to have this retirement red zone presentation, which I really enjoyed. I love the word retirement red zone. And this really refers to the 5 years prior to retirement and the 5 years after you retire. This is what I like to call as your red zone. Some things, there are uncertain markets that happen during that retirement red zone. And it's best from a sequence of returns. If you've ever heard that term before, this means that you are far better off in retirement with your finances if you are able to retire when the market is going up, as opposed to a pullback. There are a lot of things that we can do to work around that if you happen to retire and the next year the market pulls back. We are aware of that, and that's one of the reasons why we like to be very conservative at the beginning of retirement if we need to be. Also be aware of the fact that, you may think you're going to retire at 65, but for health reasons, maybe you cannot retire at 65. Maybe you have to retire earlier. So retirement may not be an age certainty. It may be something that you should prepare ahead of time and be able to retire if necessary before that. One thing is maybe health. Other things is, what if it happens in a down market where there's a lot of layoffs going on in a company? Those are all things that you'll need to manage through. Risk can be transferred to insurance companies. A lot of times people go, oh, I don't want an annuity, or I don't want an insurance policy or anything like that. I look at any financial tool as just that. It's a tool in the tool bucket. And if we need to transfer risk to an insurance company, that's definitely a strategy for some. And we can talk about that. There's a lot of talk about bucket strategies as well, and those are things we like to compartmentalize our life, so we can use those as well. Bucket strategies may be what you do with your discretionary income versus your necessities, and how you pull from different piles of money based on your strategies and your needs. And that's one tool that we like to use a lot. So it's funny, this is a picture of my early years in the business with my very young family. And throughout all of this time, there's been a lot of this real world experience that we've gained. But I will tell you, emotions in a market turmoil feels very different when you no longer get a paycheck. And so we're very mindful of how your investments have to look when you're in that retirement red zone. Simplify. I can't say this enough, but you need to simplify when you start going into retirement. And the later years, you'll definitely want that once you start having to pull out mandatory withdrawals from your IRAs and whatnot. If you miss something and life gets complicated and your cognitive skills go down, it's easy to forget something. And if you forget a mandatory withdrawal, that could mean a big tax penalty. So if you're with me, I do everything I can to make sure you don't forget those things. But simplify, simplify, simplify in every aspect of your financial and health worlds. Also, this is one that I like to say a lot. Money makes people funny, and not in a good way. So we all have differences about money and what we expect to have, just even generational differences from one generation to another value money differently. And so it's important to have open conversations with those people that will help you in your future to make sure everybody's on the same page. Unfortunately, I see a lot of family problems and situations where people aren't talking to each other anymore, and a lot of times it comes down to money. So make sure you are having those open dialogues. You don't have to have long dialogues. 5-minute conversations every now and then will keep people on the same page and understanding what's important. And the oldest sibling isn't always the smartest financially. So a lot of times families will pick the oldest sibling to be the power of attorney, on finances or healthcare directive and whatnot. Make sure that oldest sibling is the most qualified for this position. I know a lot of families feel like, oh, my oldest child should do this because they are the oldest child. And I guess a lot of times that first child is a very responsible person. But being very responsible doesn't mean that they're always the smartest financially. And this could be very stressful for that person if it's not something that they feel that comfortable with. So make sure you get the best child if you're going to have a child in these roles, taking care of you financially. Make sure they're comfortable with it. Introduce your team of advisors before you need them to work together. This is always so helpful for me to know the multiple generations in a family, if it's going to be families helping their older family members out. This also pertains to attorneys and CPAs. If we're all on the team together and we all have open lines of communication, it really helps a lot for clients, and it provides for a very solid plan. Distribute the different help that you need from your families. This distribution will never seem equal from one sibling member to another. So again, keep dialogue open, and what different children in your family can handle at different parts of their lives, because they may be going through other things. And so just remember that even if you have one person that may be in charge of your health directives, if something else is going on in that child's life, that may not be that feasible anymore. So these plans need to be flexible and take into consideration of the people in your family. And lastly, I've said this over and over again, get help from unbiased, objective people outside the family, because that is where you might get insights or ideas that you never even considered before. And so it's really helpful to have different ideas and outside the box planning for your situation. So we are full of resources. We have a lot of people in our network that are ready to help you and give you more information if there are things that we haven't touched on. And so we are a community resource. We have our website. We have a lot of information on our website. We have a group of women that we have grown very close to in our Women, Wealth, and Wellness professional network that we created. And they help us with a lot of things, from reverse mortgages to estate planning, attorney, and so on and so forth, real estate agents. Our bench is deep, and so never forget to ask us for help. We may be able to get you in the right direction. We put a lot of information out there on social media. You've seen us probably on Facebook and Instagram, and our podcasts are like a library of information. We've talked about a lot of these aging concepts on them, and here are just a few of those episodes that we point to that have a lot of great and useful information. So before many of you think that this is the end of this presentation, but I have a special treat for you. So Victor and I decided to go to a concert in Las Vegas. This is Mick Jagger in his 80s. My stepdad is a very big Rolling Stones fan. And so a bunch of us family went out to Las Vegas to see him play. And so this was one of his concerts. I'm not a big Rolling Stones fan, but I heard that Mick Jagger was in his early 80s, and I just wanted to see him perform in his early 80s because that's just amazing in my opinion. And we were blown away with his magnetism, his energy, his you can just see the way he moves. He's got still a love for it, and really did give the crowd a great show, and nobody was bored. Nobody felt like this was an 80-year-old up there on stage. And so I think, aging can be amazing and beautiful. I was just absolutely impressed by him and his lead guitarist, Keith Richard. I love this picture of him because I see these wrinkles and I see his gray hair and I say, wow, he is still a rock star, and his aging looks beautiful to me. And he was up there shredding that guitar. It was just wild to see. These are two people that definitely don't need to work anymore, but they're doing it because it still gets them going every day. They still find purpose and love, and I'm sure their dopamine is super filled while they're on that stage rocking out together. And seeing this crowd love the music that they're putting out there in the world. And so always remember to keep an active lifestyle, keep engaging what you find wonderful and exciting and curious, because as long as you're doing that, you can go through life with more quality.